As the world celebrates International Women's History Month as well, women in South Africa have joined in on those celebrations. The gathering comes at a time when South Africa also celebrates 30 years of democracy. However, women around the world are still facing many challenges. Former President Kgalema Motlanthe is addressing the event in Houghton Johannesburg. Let's listen in now.
Move to ABSA or first rent, so you are not tied to a single employer for the rest of your life. You are not chattel property like the old slave. You are not branded like the old serf. But of course, in our own history, the pass book was introduced, which was to restrict the mobility of black people under the influx control laws of apartheid. The pass book was a bane in the lives of Africans. It was variously described as a badge of slavery, of serfdom, by struggle activists and anti-apartheid organizations. And then, of course, our renowned thespians of the serpent players from New Brighton in Ngqeberha, Old Port Elizabeth. In their iconic drama entitled Sizwe Banzi is Dead, they described this pass book as follows. That bloody book, wherever you go, it's that bloody book. You go to school, it goes too. You go to work, it goes too. You go to church and pray and sing lovely hymns, it sits there with you. Go to hospital to die, it lies there too. So passes and permits were introduced to control movements of black people. But you know, in our home, the question of whether women work as hard as men was settled once and for all, because they don't. Because women get it right the first time. So even in the struggle, women were always in the forefront. They don't get the credit, of course. But male folk were forced to carry passes on their body and were expected to produce a pass any minute. Anywhere they could be stopped by a police officer and asked to produce a pass. And possession of a pass was not enough protection. You still needed what they called a work seeker's permit, because the white folk had decided that all black people are temporary sojourners in the towns. They belonged elsewhere. They didn't care to know where, but you certainly did not belong in the town. And hence, this stamp in your passbook would say, permitted to be in the magisterial area of Johannesburg under the employ of, and they put the employer's name and details in there. So if your passbook was without that work seeker's permit, you would be arrested. And the charge was simple, loaferskap. It means you won't work. You are not unemployed, you won't work, you resist working. So they charge you for that. So, as I said, women were pioneers. Women did not accept that they should carry passes. So as early as in 1913, hundreds of women marched into Bloemfontein. they would tolerate no more. They would take a stand against the much hated past system for women. This was a time in history which saw women tearing up their residential permits, organizing petitions, marching and singing through towns, and brawling with the police. Thus, the government's attempt to extend the passbook to African women was defeated right there in Bloemfontein, in Jagersfontein, and in Windbeck in 1913. Decades later, the government worked out that the urban women are problematic, and that this is now in the mid-1950s. And they decided that no, the best way to extend these passes to women is to start in rural villages. So they went to rural villages to get the women to get passes. And the passes for women, because the assumption was that, you know, with dresses, women don't have pockets to keep the pass. So they came in a little sachet with a string to hang it around your neck so that you don't forget it ever. And it, you know, you don't encounter difficulties of keeping it on your body. But then the authorities decided, no, we'll try the rural villages first. So when they got to these villages, in the village of Zirast, there's an old lady there, she's no more, who organized 7,000 of these women there to make a pile, a good heap of the passes, newly issued passes, and they burned them. Yeah, they made bonfire out of them. Of course, she was arrested and charged, convicted, and sentenced to 4 years of imprisonment. So later, that was followed by the historic march to the Union buildings by 20,000 women from all walks of life to the Union buildings. They were led by Lillian Goy, Helen Joseph, Rahima Musa, and Sophie de Bruyn in 1956. Of all these, only Aunt Sophie is still alive. So when they got to Union buildings, they sang. And the Prime Minister of the time was Strydom. And they said, wena Strydom, watinta bafazi, watinta imbogoto uzawufa. And indeed, Strydom died. So I thought, because this is Human Rights Day, and as I said, it was occasioned by our own history and how we got to where we are, that perhaps just a recount briefly of this history would be appropriate. But my instructions, strictly speaking, were that I should welcome you. So once again, so I've kind of detoured. So I'm back on track now. My instructions were that I should welcome you. And once again, you're most welcome. We embrace you all. Thank you so much. Well, that's another battle that we usually have, because...
Well, live visuals there, former President Kgalema Motlanthe addressing the event in Houghton Johannesburg. Some opening remarks. In fact, as the world celebrates International Women's History Month, women in South Africa have joined in on that celebration.